Welcome to the Tradesman channel. We are doing a new style of video. We're going to see how my radio voice is, along with maybe some of the old video footage that we had on here as we are gearing up for the next timber frame project. It's going to be a blast. Hopefully the weather holds out well for us this winter and I can get to the woods and start cutting timber a little bit quicker than spring. So we're going to see what happens. I thought it would be fun to kind of once in a while go through some of the old videos that most of you who are subscribed to this channel have not seen because they are buried in the old YouTube archives. With over 600 videos on this channel, there's a lot of them that, like I said, they just don't get seen. What you're watching right here, this was actually the second or third video I put out, and it was actually the first one where I was doing any kind of timber framing work, and we were cutting a massive tenon on a 10 by 16 timber for a tie beam. I'll tell you what, I've had a lot of questions with this project. What got me into it? What made me want to do this? Are you friggin' nuts? You're batshit crazy? Just whatever, you know, you get a lot of that stuff, and that will cover some of the thought processes in these videos. This is more just kind of a conversation of me and you, and I'm going to see how smooth I can sit here and hold a train of thought for 14, 15 minutes. So we'll see how well it works. So what you guys just saw me doing there in this old video was kerfing out for that tenon, and that really is the hard way of doing it. It's easier in some ways, but really it is the hard way. It's not so bad with a circular saw, but I found through viewer suggestions and some other timber framers who have sawmills like I do, that it's a lot easier to set that thing up on my sawmill and cut most of that tenon off with the actual sawmill, with the band mill. It saves you a lot of time. But throughout this series, I spent a lot of time covering things that I did do a little bit of the harder way because I knew a lot of my viewers didn't have things like a sawmill, or they didn't have the chain mortise or some of the fancy tools. So I always tried to show ways of doing things that anybody can do if they had to do it. But so let's start at the beginning. I'll give you a little bit of my life story. When I was a kid, I was raised by an uncle in a very small town, and we had this old 1820s barn at my house growing up. All hand-hewn beams, all the old pegs, everything like that. I was always very fascinated with that building. It just looked like a giant puzzle they'd put together. It's still standing today. It's not in terrible shape. I will say the big portion of the barn, which was added later on from the original frame, actually gave out long before the original timber frame did. Now, those timbers in that old barn were all white oak, and I tell you what, try to drive a nail into it. Absolutely terrible. I got a damn fly buzzing around the microphone in my house, being a pain in my ass right now. Good thing the camera's not on me. But, so I was always very fascinated with the process. I had no idea how they arrived at that point. I had no idea how they got those marks in the timbers. I didn't know that in the 1820s they didn't have a sawmill to cut what they wanted. They did everything the hard way. And it wasn't until I was quite a bit older, probably in my late teens, early 20s, to where I really started researching a little bit and learning some of the things about how those buildings were put together. I was always a weird kid, you know. I always liked history, things like that, and reading, and so the timber framing and traditional building methods really kind of followed suit with the things that I was interested in. And that makes a world of difference when you do have an interest. But I knew nothing of hand tools growing up. I didn't know, gosh, the things you don't know when you're a kid. But finally one day I had hit a point where the curiosity was just so much I had to do something about it. So I started researching. It started with books because when I really got interested in it, YouTube wasn't a big thing then. There wasn't a ton of videos on this platform at the time. Everything had to be learned the hard way. I did find some places like the Forestry Forum early on, and I just kind of started educating myself on this process. I said in many videos I spent 6 or 7 years researching the hell out of this method of building things before I even picked up a tool to start it. And I'm glad I did. That was a big thing, was just having some kind of a base knowledge going into it. And it was just a huge help. I was able to foresee some problems before they became problems, simply because, I'd read what other people had done, or I'd looked up pictures of what they had done. I mean, there's nothing, there wasn't much ingenuity in this build. I mean, there were some workarounds for me to be able to do this alone, because as you can see, that right there is not a big timber. Those are sitting on 4-foot wide sawhorses right there, and that's a big timber. It's very heavy to move. So you learn little tricks to work with the timber so you're not breaking your body. Of course, as you will see later on, if you are new here, we ended up doing that anyway. But the handsaw work. Now that big circular saw you guys see me using there, that is a skill saw with a Bigfoot attachment on. You get I think it's 3 7/8 inch cut out of that thing, or 3 3/4, one or the other. And when you're going on 10-inch thick timbers, it makes for a lot of chisel work and a lot of handsaw work to get those broken down to the size. I will tell you, if I'd started this project with the Super Sasquatch or Sawsquatch or whatever, the skill saw, that's a 16 5/16 inch blade skill saw, worm gear saw. It's just a bigger version of that one you see sitting on the timber there. If I had had that thing with its 6-inch depth of cut, this project, all this joinery, would have taken a lot less time to do. But I will say, doing it the way I did it, what you see here with all the kerfing, all the handsaw, very therapeutic. It was very relaxing. You have a bad day at work. My job, I'm troubleshooting all day, so your head's always kind of exploding with just trying to fix something, just trying to make it work. So there's nothing better than coming home when you just need to decompress and just doing something with your hands, just something simple. And boy, I tell you what, that's getting lost in today's society. There's not, I fear that it's a pretty small portion of society that actually comes home and does something with their hands. A lot of people I see, they get on their phone and all that good stuff. But this was a process. This whole project was it was insane. It was awesome. My wife lost me for 3 or 4 years on this project. Of course, she had me for a good 5-6 month period in the house recovering from this project when we had our little accident. But that was not much of a vacation for her, I could tell you that. And poor old Nurse Mary for 5-6 months. I had to have been hard on her. So the species of wood you see right there in that timber is eastern white pine, which we've discussed heavily in the videos. Eastern white pine is the second most stable species of wood in North America. Douglas fir would be the most stable species. So the stability of the white pine, I believe, and I'm kind of hypothesizing here, is that it is a pretty low moisture content wood compared to things like hemlock, white oak, stuff like that. So the higher the moisture content in the wood, obviously the more movement you're going to get out of that as it dries out. The other thing that makes white pine a good choice, it's pretty straight grained. It doesn't shrink a lot, and it's pretty just all around stable, and it's easy to work with. It's a lot lighter than a lot of the other stuff you're going to find. So I always recommend it. But some of the drawbacks, the bugs are not afraid of white pine. Not that I've had any issues, but I have seen people that have. And you can kind of negate some of that by treating your timbers with borax or borates, things like that the bugs don't like to eat on. That actually also helps preserve the wood a little bit. And it's not rot resistant. You are not going to leave, if you're not sealed up properly, it's only a matter of time before that rots away on you. So that's something you really want to look at if you're looking to pick the species of wood to use for timber framing. I will say, eastern white pine, it's eastern. You're going to find it primarily in the northeast in any heavy stands. You get down south, you have southern yellow pine, and my buddy Nathan over at Out of the Woods Forestry, he can tell you that southern yellow pine moves quite a bit, and it's not the best choice, but you can do it. Now, if you go out west, you're going to have a choice of Douglas fir, ponderosa pine, and not very much else. Talked to Tim over to the Great Plains Craftsman, another friend of mine, who eventually we all want to do a podcast together, but who knows? We've been talking about that for the last year and just have not been able to get our shit together to do it. But anyway, I digress once again, like always. Now, when Tim built his timber frame, and if you guys have not checked him out, check out Tim over at the Great Plains Craftsman on YouTube. His building is gorgeous. It is a showpiece. He did phenomenal work. Everything came out beautiful. In the setting, the backdrop that guy has at his place, it is just beautiful. Breathtaking. He's out in South Dakota. You know, he's not too far from Rushmore. He's up in the Black Hills. And just the scenery is stunning. The building he built is stunning. He just did a dovetail log cabin, a little one. And the man just does high quality, excellent work. But his choice that he has up there is ponderosa pine. And from what he was telling me, I hope I never have to use ponderosa pine for anything. He had timbers in there he had to discard because just they were strapped together, they were sticker stacked, they were kept out of the sun, and they still churn to pretzels. That is an example of a lumber that is just not stable, not very stable, and it's going to cause you some headaches down the road. So when you get into timber selection, straight grained is good. Things that aren't going to move a lot is good. Our next timber frame is going to be with mostly hemlock. I'm not a big fan of hemlock, but hemlock is very strong, but it's going to move a lot as it dries, and that's why you build them green. You put it all together, you want them to dry together, and all that good stuff. And hell, this video here, this is where I figured out how to do time lapse and how to speed things up. Look at that, look how fast that saw is. That was fun. So this was the third or fourth video I'd put out on my channel. I think the fourth one. The third one was on timber framing tools, and this was at a point in my YouTube career, if you want to call it that, where I was kind of trying to find my style, kind of trying to learn the camera work. All this was filmed with a cell phone. Probably the first 200 plus videos on this channel were filmed with a cell phone, maybe even 300. But so we did all right conveying the message. But man, do I miss doing that right there. So what you're looking at, that same timber that we just cut that big tenon on, that would be floor joist pockets, 5x8 floor joist pockets. And I was able to get away because that timber's so deep right there. It's a 10x16, like I said. I was able to get away with full depth floor joist pockets. And that saved me a lot of work because I didn't have to do the reductions on the 5x8s. There's some timber framers, they like to put a reduction on everything, and there are some big benefits to that, and we'll cover that as we go along. Look how that just pops out of there nice. And over in the background, you have my middle child, my daughter, and I'm looking at these old videos, and I cannot believe how much that child has grown since we started this channel. Master disaster. I think she was 6 or 7 there, I want to say. And I'm a little bit lighter there and not gimpy. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. But anyway, so there's the first tie beam that we covered on the channel. And I know this is just yakking, but once in a while it's just fun to yak. We'll see how this does. And I think this is at a good point to kind of wrap it up, this rapid fire, just yakking my ass off here. But so if you guys have any subjects pertaining to timber framing, things like that, that you would like to see covered in this, let me know. We'll talk about it. We'll see what happens. And if you guys like this format, please let me know in the comments below. So thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the next one.